What is cross-cultural conflict resolution? Let's start with the word culture. Since we're discussing cross-cultural communication, cross-cultural discussions, culture should stand out to us. I have 5 tips to share with you on the word culture. Tip number 1, we all have it, we all ignore it, and we all become aware of it when it is away from us. Let me repeat what I said. We all have culture. If I make you do an exercise right now, in fact, let's do it just for 5 seconds, maybe 7 seconds if you may. We're going to pause our breathing. We're going to just take a deep breath and not take another breath for another 7 seconds. I hope this small exercise made you think about breathing, brought to your awareness how important oxygen is, or made you think, oh, I have been breathing all day, all my life. That is culture for you. If I take your culture away from you, you're going to feel how you felt in these 7 seconds, because that's our identity. That's who we are. So culture is who we are. Culture is how we are programmed to think. Culture is the air we breathe in. Culture is like how we breathe air in. Culture is so powerful that we make decisions based on culture. Yet it is misunderstood. Why is it misunderstood? Because of 2 facts. Fact number 1, most of us don't spend time thinking about our culture, understanding our culture. And my dear colleagues, to my awareness, to my 20 years of work in dispute resolution, all I have learned is a lot of work we all need to do is internal. As per my good friend Ken Fox from Minnesota, 70% of the work we ought to do is internal. Just like that, I want you to understand what your culture is. I'm going to come back to that thought in a second. And point number 2 on culture. Culture is complex, it is beautiful, and it is challenging. I am mindful of the words I'm using: complex, beautiful, and challenging. Let's jump into it. Let's expand this. So I defined culture very briefly to you, but I want you to notice that a couple of scholars, one of them from Dutch, who has defined culture as something that connects us as human beings. And there's another scholar, this time also from Europe, who has defined culture as something that separates us. So if you think of 2 worldviews, there are people who think culture is something that connects us, humanity, need for respect, us being with each other, our need to be heard. Then it is something that connects us. And then there are people who may think culture is how we dress, our skin color, our accent, the way we think, our upbringing. Then we are different in cultures. Regardless of which way you're thinking right now, I'm going to give you my way of thinking on culture. I think there are 2 ways to think about culture. There is a culture of an individual and there's a culture of a group. A group culture takes time to evolve, to change. America as a culture, India as a culture, women as a culture, a faith as a culture, law as a culture. Can you and I change law overnight? Let's try. It won't work. But we can contribute, we can work towards it, and collectively, we can put a dent in it. And that's what you're trying to do in your bar association by doing these programs over time. Having said that, how about as an individual, though? If one of the honorable judges present today would like to change himself or herself, could they do it? You have way more freedom in doing that. But there are 2 points further in that that I think you will think about and enjoy. You will be able to change your culture, but there are 2 requirements. Requirement number 1, you have to be internally motivated. You cannot change your culture unless you want to change your culture. We are too comfortable in our culture. We're too happy in who we are. A personal example, and I'm going to come back to point one and two one more time. So I've not covered point two, and I'm aware of that. Personal example. I was in Brazil about 2 weeks ago. I spoke to the federal judges. They were very kind to me. I was honored by the Chief Labor Court of Brazil in Brasilia twice in a row now for my training, for my work in dispute resolution. And as I'm meeting the justices, as I'm meeting the honorable jurists of the country, federal judges, as well as state Supreme Court judges, one thing I've realized while working there is that Brazil has some commonalities from my last trip, which was 6 years ago, to the second trip, which was 5 years ago, to the third trip, which was 3 years ago, to this trip, which was 2 weeks ago. And I noticed the rendezvous Brazil has with time. They start conversations a little late with hospitality. Every time I've been there, a judge or a senior member of a bar association came to pick me up at the airport. That is culture. They have opened up their entire evenings to have dinner with me. That is culture. They have hosted me in hotels. And when I tell them, allow me to pay, when I offer them, allow Pepperdine to pay, they tell me, no, you are our guest. And they will not charge it to organizations that personally want to fund it. That is culture. So you see how Brazilian culture is evolving. Also part of Brazilian culture, if you may, is some of the crime happening in country. Did you realize that in Sao Paulo, when I was giving a visit, I was with my associate attorneys of the law firms I was working with, training with, and some general counsel. Each one of them had a bulletproof car. And I'm like, you have a bulletproof car? They said, yes, you have to watch out. And I was wearing my watch. I was wearing having my phone on, as walking on the street. And they said, no, put your phone in the pocket. You cannot talk on the phone on the street. And for the next 7 days, I was missing the freedom of walking in LA without thinking, can I wear my watch? Can I have my phone? What is taken away from me for those 7 days is what is made aware of me. What is my American culture? What they gifted me also made me aware what is my American culture. So culture is something we become aware when we are uncomfortable, when we are taken out, or when we become super comfortable or given some amazing treat. Like, for example, when I travel and train in India, law students, will never let me pick up my laptop bag. They pick it up for you. These small things, and they always have a diary that you have to sign before you leave a lecture. I think that's a beautiful tradition. And the most senior professor will do a summary of your lecture before you depart. That is culture. So now coming back to the 2 points I was making a reference to. Point number one is there's a culture of a group and there's a culture of an individual. And I want you to be aware of that. And within individual, I was telling you two things. Number one, if you're motivated, you can change your culture, internally motivated. You can, all of us can. You have to be truly internally aspired to do that. Point number two is not just being motivated. Sometimes life events must take place to change our culture. Now, colleagues, I moved to the United States about 20 years ago. I love this country and I love India where I grew up. In 20 years, I've adopted, imbibed what American culture to me is. The best of it. I love the work ethic. I love how much hardworking we are overall. I love the love with law. I love my work. All of that has allowed me to shift, to change, to dramatically adjust to the vibe of the local culture, if you may. Because I want to be rewarded, and I can only get rewarded if I reward back. If I give in, it's almost like I can give peace if I have peace within me. So if you have motivated and you're deciding to go to another country, for many of us, that's difficult. So life events will be changing your daily practices, doing meditation, watching your diet, doing prayer, if you may, if you believe, right? starting a new friend, going to a new place. These are small changes that can make us aware and change our culture. Allow me to come back to the very first point I'm making. What is culture? We discussed culture is complex. We discussed culture is beautiful. We discussed within culture, we have group culture and individual culture. Now, folks, there are also different kinds of cultures. We have organizational culture, we have national culture, regional culture, organizational culture like law. Clearly, lawyers, judges, we think differently than non lawyers. Ask me, I meet with students who are philosophy students sometimes, engineering students, and then I have law students. Is there a difference? Absolutely. The way they're organized, the way they're prepared, the way they watch time, it impacts you within 1 year of studying law. And many of us have studied law for more than a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. How it shifts the way we think. So now I said you have organizational culture, national culture like America, Korea, India. We all know there are huge differences there. So what's the third one I want to say to you? I want to mention there is something I like that I've developed myself and I like to think about it. I will call this individualized culture, your identity. Now, colleagues, you may like your father or mother a lot, and you have taken a lot from them. Or you may like the fact that you're sitting on a bench and learned a lot from your other jurist colleagues. Or you may like the lot that you are living in, I don't know, Fresno or San Francisco, or and living in that city allowed you to change yourself. I don't know what that reality is, but the point is each one of us take lessons individually, not collectively, and that shapes our individual culture. Hence, when typically we have statements like all Mexicans, it is going to be a wrong statement. All Americans, 300 plus million people cannot be same. If you need proof, you can look at my two children. They are directly opposite of each other, and they belong to same family. My daughter wants to be US president, so with your blessings, maybe one day she will. My son is happy playing video games. Speaking of male and female culture, let's come back. I want to give you some tips. Let's go to enough about theory about culture. Let's get to some tips. I understand legal mind love points, so I'm prepared with 5 points. I'm adhering to your culture. Let me give you 5 tips on how to think now, how to work across cultural differences. Can I? First one, awareness. The best gift you can give to yourself at this moment in life, whichever moment that is being aware of your own culture. What are my biases? Take the Harvard implicit bias test, please, if you haven't done it yet. There are multiple of them. There are more than a dozen now. Take it on race at least once. Take it on gender at least once, among others. See your scores, face it. Google Harvard implicit bias test, and you'll learn more about it. Become aware, not just about your biases, but about your strengths. Ask your friends, hey, what do you think about my culture, my traits, my values? Because at the end of the day, culture is about values. I'm still on point one. Also, please at least think, how does my culture interacts with other cultures? How does my culture interacts with other cultures? Now, here comes my biggest point. To facilitate all the first 3 points on awareness, leave your culture often. Leave it often. Travel. There's a beautiful quote by a Brazilian author that says, traveling allows you to change the clothing of your soul. Traveling allows you to change the clothing of your soul. So I'm a teacher at heart. Allow me to teach one aspect. When did you change the clothing of your soul last time? And those of you who want to travel to India, talk to me. I love taking guests with me. We'll separately talk about that. Visit me in Pepperdine, part of my culture. I have a home in Malibu. Come visit us. We'll love to host you and show you Strauss Institute, Pepperdine University. It also has a culture. It's a Christian community. And as a Christian community, Pepperdine is very proud to believe in the feeling of community, to give excellence, to believe in leadership. Coming back, in my 5 points. You have point one, awareness. Point two, adaptability. If you remember one thing from today, I want you to remember the word adaptability, flexibility. You want to become really good across cultures, you want to become culturally fluid. Please work on your adaptability. If I went to 12 countries in last 12 months, actually 14 months, 12 countries, and I can be in Saudi Arabia one day or Dubai the next day, and then Switzerland the third day, and then coming back and going to Brazil, and then coming back and going to Uganda, Rwanda, Amsterdam, Italy, Netherlands, Italy. What I have learned in all these countries just in the last year or so is that those cultures are staying the way they are. I am supposed to change as per them. I'm supposed to meet as to where they are. So park this idea of adaptability. I'm going to come back to it because there's something more I want to share with you. But let's go to point three, curiosity. I want you to be curious. And you have layers of curiosity, my friend. You could be curious by listening to one radio show about India, and you may think, I know everything about India or South Korea or North Korea or how Singaporeans are different than Indonesians. Okay, great. That's good curiosity and a fine effort. But allow me to push you further. What if we become curious by picking a book on that country now, or a book on cross-cultural understanding? Well, become third level curious. How about if we call a person who lives that culture and ask them, hey, what do you think? I'm going to Singapore. You're from Singapore. Tell me, what do I need to be aware of? How do Singaporeans negotiate? Fourth level of curiosity. How about now I call a lawyer or a judge who is from Singapore, because now they have one thing common with me. They have law, but the other thing uncommon with me, they have a national culture that's different. So they can now speak my language, yet teach me how different they are. Fifth level of curiosity, I'm actually going to go travel there, live there for a week without work. Did I say without work? And then work for the next week. Now that is critical. To understand a culture, I have to live by their norms. That can do it for just 2 more seconds. Please ask questions, but ask questions respectfully. When I talk about implicit cultures, I'll come back to give you some advice on asking questions indirectly. For the moment, remember curiosity, remember adaptability, remember awareness, and that brings me to point four. Please control your urge to judge, to generalize, to stereotype. 2 years ago, I gave a opening address also in a IAM conference, International Academy of Medias in Montreal, Canada. And in those 15, 20 minutes, which I can happy to share through our honorable judge, a link to it, it's on my channel. And I spoke about the power of stereotypes. And I challenged everyone in the room, more than 200 international mediators. What is generalization? But more importantly, I challenge them why we do generalize, why we stereotype. Allow me to speak on it just for 30 seconds or maybe 45. We generalize because we like to save energy. We generalize and stereotype because we are lazy. We generalize and stereotype because it is comfortable. We generalize and stereotype because it's available to us, it's availability bias. We generalize and stereotype because of confirmation bias, because it kind of fits our narrative of who we are and who they are. Who is me, us, who is them. My problem with point number five is the very narrative of us and them creates differences. If I'm traveling to 70 countries, I cannot have us and them when I go there. They are me, I am them. This year, my wife and I are announcing a scholarship, a full scholarship for a student from Africa. It's going out in media maybe today or tomorrow. I'm very careful. I could have started a scholarship for a student from India or America. But when I traveled to 5 different countries in Africa, I could personally see three things: the presence of people, beautiful presence, spiritual, mental, emotional, physical presence. Number two, the zeal to learn. The zeal to learn is unmatched. And number three, the lack of resources. I'm not generalizing all African countries now. Right now, I'm focusing on Kampala, Uganda, where the Honorable Supreme Court of Uganda were my students, including the Chief Justice, graduated with a Master's in Dispute Resolution a couple of months ago. Coming back, you have to give back to where it belongs. Can I take a little break from culture? I'm a deeply connected guy to all things being, so allow me to say one thing. I will be incomplete if I don't share it. If you want to complete yourself, please start giving. Many of you are giving your time, your effort, your talent. You can give money, you can give your presence, you can give your talent. Please pass it on. I have so many students, many different schools have students who are yearning to be your interns, externs, clerks. Please allow some of them to come, because if you have magic, I want them to learn the magic. Thank you for that little public announcement for students. Coming back. I was talking about controlling our tendencies to judge. I gave you 5 points underneath that as to how easy it is for us to judge, stereotype, and what are some of the biases why we do it. It's a constant struggle. We need awareness. My point number one. We all do it. Each one of us do it. It's kind of like become a mode of survival. But the reason the hate crimes are increasing is because we judge. The reasons we are at war with each other is because not only we judge, we stop listening. The reasons we are killing each other is not just we are judging and we stop listening, it's because we think we know. And hence, I'm going to share a quote to you from my recent visit to Rwanda, to the genocide memorial where more than 1 million Tutsis were murdered. And in this memorial, there's a beautiful quote by a genocide survivor. And the quote reads, "If you knew me and you knew yourself, if you knew me and you knew yourself, you wouldn't have killed me." I think what's happening is we think we know. And we know because this is your faith, because this is your color, and this is your nationality, this is your class, this is your educational background. And the more I travel, the more I grow older, folks, the more I realize how least I know. That brings me to my point 5 under practical tips. Let me remind you where we are at right now. Number 1 was awareness. Number 2 was adaptability, flexibility. Number 3 was curiosity. Number 4 is controlling your tendency to judge, because they're not going away, they're going to stay. We just have to control them. Being mindful. In fact, let me give you one more point under number 4. The best technique I can give you is mindfulness. It is you're developing a practice, internal practice that helps you. And I'm positive many of you already do it. So forgive me for that reminder. That brings me to point 5, practical tip. There's something called patterns of communication. Folks, we communicate differently around the world. Do you know we are in minority pattern of communication? English-speaking nations are minority, not majority. We may think they're majority because we are English-speaking. And yes, some cultures tried their best to make the world English-speaking, and they became successful to an extent. But coming back to reality, English-speaking nations, especially the way we speak English, we speak what we call low context communication. And what that means, my friends, is low context communication is explicit. That's the word I want you to write down. Explicit and direct. So the most practical tip I can give you is very high chance on your daily practices as a lawyer, as a judge, as a thinker, as a writer, as a speaker, whatever your practice is. You will interact with someone from high context societies. High context society, majority of the world is implicit, is indirect. They don't look into your eyes. They speak more from body language or non-verbal communication, a better term. Let me give you an example. Korean Air had one of the worst records of airline disasters before year 2000. Author I really like, a brilliant man named Malcolm Gladwell, spoke about this on CNN with Fareed Zakaria if you're really interested to learn more. My time is limited, so I'm going to cut it very short. So Malcolm looked up this data and found out that part of the reason Korean air was so bad in the record was communication. Part of the reason of communication was they were speaking in Korean with each other, which meant Korean is a high context language. So hierarchy plays a huge role. So when the first officer knew that the plane is going down or there's a trouble, he or she, instead of telling the pilot, pilot, I need your urgent attention. The plane is going down, fix it. He or she will say, pay attention. He or she will say, I think I may request you, if you could have a second right now, to please look at the radar, but if you feel comfortable. That politeness, that level of indirectness led to more than 300 people dying in different air disasters. How do I know? I don't know. It's Malcolm's research, but I found fascinating. I can empathize with it because I grew up in a culture, India, Hindi, Punjabi, that is also very indirect. I am at this event this week. In addition to my talks and lectures, I'm attending a wedding for a very dear Indian friend, very successful um, farmer from California, one of the most successful here, and from the valley. And this guy owns pistachio farms, right? Thousands of acres. And the first time I met, he said, you have to come to all the events. I said, sir, there are 8 events at your wedding. That's a lot. Can I come to 2? His response, you're coming to all of them. And I said, yes, sir. He knows I'm not going to make to 8. I know I'm not going to make it to 8. But how did I end the conversation? Yes, sir. That is cross-cultural communication. So going back to Korean Air example, one thing they changed, can you believe? And they haven't had a single crash. They trained their pilots to speak English. English is non-hierarchical, it's direct, explicit language. In English, we say, hey, brother, plane is going down, do something. And we don't say the other indirectness. So that brings me to conclusion of the first point, 5 points, with this emphasis on high context, low context. High context, low context is a term, my folks, I gotta share with you, is derived by an American anthropologist, Edward Hall. Now, Mr. Hall is a fantastic mind, published terrific books on communication. And one of the things I learned from him reading his work was this idea that communication is really controlled by the way we think. Now, folks, what you see in me is how I'm speaking. What you can't see in me is how I'm thinking. Now, you can make an assumption how Dr. Singh is thinking because this is how he's speaking. But that's an assumption. Across cultures, we think very differently. Can I move towards my conclusion of lecture 1 today? I promise I will be back, and I promise we'll have a long Q&A for anything you wish to ask on any of these topics. Maybe we'll have a couple of minutes today for a Q&A too. But that has to take me to my conclusion, my last piece today. I shared a couple of things. I said I'll also share with you some of the best practices and some of the blunders. So let's go there. The best practice I can share with you is pay attention, as I was saying, on communication, and understand this chart with me. Imagine a pyramid. At the very bottom of the pyramid, imagine the word miscommunication. Above comes misunderstanding. Above that is mismatch of expectations. So let's start with miscommunication, misunderstanding, mismatch of expectations. And now above that, I will say emotional underpinning, creation of emotional turmoil. Above that is dispute. And above that is conflict. The origin of conflict in many places start with miscommunication or lack of communication or no communication. So the sentence or the word above that I gave you, misunderstanding, please add one more word to it. It's not just misunderstanding, it's misunderstanding and creation of assumptions. She hates me. That's why she didn't call me for the last 2 years. The reality, she's waiting for my call from the last 2 years. He must apologize to me, and I want the apology in public. The reality, I'll be very okay if he just says I'm sorry to me and give me a hug. So what are these masks that we hide behind? And colleagues, is not the mask that we hide behind for others. Many times we hide behind the mask even in front of ourselves. So what about communication I can share further with you? So we're having practice negotiation, mediation. And by the way, um, I hope there are some mediators present today. I hope some of you are mediators. Um, can I just plug in for one thing about mediation? I hope some of you join me to become mediators. Mediation is a profession that changes your culture. I don't miss practicing law for a second. In fact, I repent that I did practice law for a little bit. Um, it makes you compassionate. It makes you empathetic. It makes you understanding. It heals you of your own wounds. It makes you start giving. It energizes you. It fulfills you. It satisfies you. It is difficult work. It is very difficult to listen to two people, two attorneys at the minimum. And many times it's going to be more than two, right? So I got to take this call. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back with you all.